So, ladies and gentlemen, very welcome to this evening's talk. This is a joint initiative between Örebro University and the Swedish Skeptics, Föreningen Vetenskap och Folkbildning. My name is Dan Larhammar. I am from the University of Uppsala, and I used to be the chairman of the Swedish Skeptics. I'm still a board member. It is a very special honor for me to introduce today's speaker for two reasons. First, because I used to live here in Örebro during two periods of my life, and I was even enrolled at this university once upon a time, but then I ended up in Uppsala, where I now am at the Department of Neuroscience. But primarily, of course, it's an honor and a pleasure to introduce the speaker, because always when I give lectures about alternative medicine, which I do frequently, the scientist that I cite the most is today's speaker, Professor Edzard Ernst. The other name I used to mention when I lecture about alternative medicine is for the opposite reason to Professor Ernst's critical thinking, and that is the person who invented homeopathy, one of the most pseudoscientific practices that is still in use, and that was Samuel Hahnemann, who was born in the 18th century. And believe it or not, but according to Wikipedia, Professor Ernst actually started his career in a homeopathic hospital in Munich. I'd like to tell you a few words about Dr. Ernst's career. He was born and trained in Germany. He became a professor in physical medicine and rehabilitation in Vienna, in Austria. And he left this position in 1993 to become the world's first professor of complementary medicine, and that was at the University of Exeter in southwestern England. He is now a British citizen since many years. He is the director of complementary medicine at the Peninsula College of Medicine and Dentistry in Exeter and Plymouth since 2002. Professor Ernst has published an amazing number of studies of alternative medicine, all with a very critical view. I did a search in the literature database the other day and came up with a number of 600. So a few minutes ago, I asked Professor Ernst whether that was really true. And the correct number should be over 1,000. So it's absolutely incredible. Just if I search for acupuncture studies, there's 150 of those, studies of homeopathy, 80, etc., etc. So I dare say that Professor Ernst is the most well-known scientist in the world in the field of alternative medicine. He has written a book that has been translated to Swedish, and you probably saw it on display outside here, so please take the opportunity to obtain this book. It's an excellent book, not only because it scrutinizes alternative medicine, but that it does so in a way that actually explains how science works, and it gives a lot about the history also of these alternative practices. So it is a very great honor to have you here, Professor Ernst. You are here in connection with a medical symposium taking place here in Örebro today and tomorrow. So we are very much looking forward to your lecture. Please.
Got it. Intelligence test, which I invariably fail. Hello, it's nice to be here. I thought I use this as a first slide. You probably can't read it. I realize you can't read it. It's welcome to the National Society of Skeptics. So that's why I brought it. And there's one skeptic saying to the other skeptic, "I don't believe we've met." And the other one replies, "I don't believe you don't believe we've met." This is what I like about skeptics. They don't believe in believing. And I also don't believe in believing. So in that way, at least, I'm a skeptic. The talk today is about alternative medicine. And it's a subject that is close to my heart, as you know, and we've published a book about it, which pleasantly was a bestseller in this country. If it's very readable, then it's due to Simon Singh, who sends his regards. If it carries a lot of knowledge about alternative medicine, then it's probably due to my input. And it's dedicated to this man. You might not recognize him. It's Prince Charles. A lot of people ask us why we dedicated it to him. Well, you have to read the book to understand it. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek to dedicate it to Prince Charles, because we're actually quite critical to him. And my standard answer these days is because he deserves it. I'll come back to Prince Charles at the end of my lecture. This is what I'm going to talk about. Just a little bit about the extremely boring subject of terminology. Then I intend to give you a background on what alternative medicine is. I'm going to discuss how we can test it. Then the main part of my lecture, what do these tests actually show? Not just mine, but worldwide. And then I'm going to ask the tricky question, why do people experience benefit from ineffective treatments? And then finally, if I'm still awake, because I had to get up frightfully early to be here today, I come to some conclusions. So, the Babylonic terminology, we used to call it alternative medicine, and this is still the most popular term. This is what we use in our book. This is what I use in this lecture. But some people commented that most of its usage is actually not instead of mainstream medicine, but as an add-on to mainstream medicine, and therefore the term complementary medicine might be better. That's also the name of my chair. I'm chair of complementary medicine, and then some people used both in the sense of alternative and complementary medicine, and we often shorten that for CAM. Other terminologies, unorthodox medicine, and many, many others. And the new one down at the bottom is integrated medicine. And it's surprising how often the subject has renamed itself. Integrated medicine, or the Americans say integrative medicine, is the new term, and it sounds very, very credible. But I'm going to very quickly show you what I think about that term. I looked, and that's very recently, not published as yet, at 6 textbooks of integrated medicine. And I extracted the modalities, the treatments for which these books had full chapters. So all 6 had a chapter on acupuncture. Therefore, we have a 6 here. One had a chapter on Alexander technique. One had a chapter on animal-assisted therapy. One on applied kinesiology. And you see this vast array of treatments. Now, what do you remark first of all when you see this extraction from the 6 books? I think what is striking is that there's hardly any mainstream treatment on this list. So why is it called integrated medicine? If it's truly integrated medicine, it should include both mainstream and alternative medicine. The other thing that strikes me is the level of disagreement between the authors, indicating that even the authors of textbooks of this field don't seem to agree on what is covered under this umbrella. And this is depicted by so many treatments being included only in 1 or 2 of these books. Anyway, this continues. That wasn't all. It didn't fit on one slide, and you can see that this theme of alternative treatments of disagreement amongst authors continues, and I think this shows very clearly what we have to think of integrated medicine. It is marketed and promoted as a sort of new approach, the best of 2 worlds, Prince Charles tends to say, but it's actually only alternative medicine through the back door. And these are the ones where there is some level of agreement, by which I mean mentioned in at least 4 books, and you can see these are the classical alternative treatments. And these are the ones in red are the ones which I'm going to perhaps discuss today, albeit briefly. So, what about the background in more general terms on alternative medicine? Well, it's described in dramatically different terms, and it depends whether you are a proponent of alternative medicine or an opponent. I suspect today we have more of the opponents here, but the proponents would say it's holistic healthcare, it's healthcare that is suppressed by the establishment. It has stood the test of time, indicating it is safe and effective. It is somehow in harmony with nature. It follows a different paradigm and therefore cannot be tested with the tools of science, and it is progressive. The skeptics would counter that it's dogmatic, biologically implausible, regressive rather than progressive, unscientific, disproven, untested, and bears many of the qualities of a cult. So we are a little bit on collision terms depending on where we come from. Very often I give lectures to either mixed audiences or audiences that are in favor of alternative medicine, and quite rarely to skeptics. Why is it important? It's important because so many people use it. And here I have tried to summarize the 1-year prevalence data of CAM, complementary alternative medicine. I still use that term quite often, in general populations, where we know it based on large enough samples, random samples of the population. And you can see that once again Germany is trying to dominate the world, albeit the alternative ones, yet beaten by Japan. And in Japan it seems that 75% of the general population is using alternative medicine. I didn't find such data for Sweden, but in the UK, where I come from, we have very little usage, around 15-20%, depending which survey you want to trust. And that is actually quite amazing, because even though the usage is not high in the United Kingdom, the subject is very popular, and you can't escape it in the broadsheets, in the media in general. And it might indicate that either the UK is an island of sanity, and all these people are more inclined to madness here, or it might show us where the UK and other countries are moving towards, and there's quite some indication that the latter is the case. Now, these are 1-year prevalence figures, which means a positive answer to the question, have you used alternative medicine within the last year? These are notorious unreliable because recall bias and so forth. But more importantly, I need to point out this is the general population. If we are dealing with patient populations with samples suffering from specific conditions, we have much higher or even higher prevalence rates. For instance, it would be quite difficult to find a single cancer patient who hasn't at least been tempted to use some form of alternative medicine. So it is important because it's prevalent. And if it's so prevalent, we also understand that it costs a lot of money globally. At present, some time ago, $60 billion US. In the US alone, $47 billion. In the UK, we have estimated it costs 1.6 billion pounds. And this is where we're going. It's been projected that in 2015, the global supplement market will be almost $100 billion. And that, I think we can agree, is pretty substantial. I mentioned the press. I hardly have a day where I don't have a press contact in the sense that some journalist phones me up. And here we have tried to summarize what has happened in terms of publications in broadsheets in Britain since the beginning of the millennium. We haven't carried this on to the present day. This stops here in 2006, but you can see that pretty much 300 articles in the broadsheets appear on alternative medicine, which is a lot. I can tell you, if you had a similar graph for any other field of medicine, gynecology or neurology or something, you wouldn't even see it here. So the press is obsessed by it, and obviously the general public likes to read about it. And in addition, we have 50 million, I'm not exaggerating, 15 million websites related to this subject. And 49.99999 are hair-raisingly dangerous and rubbishy. That I can say with some confidence because we have published several studies where we have shown that following the advice of such websites is actually a safe way into an early grave in the vast majority of cases. And it's quite unbelievable what is being promoted there, but we do not seem to have a proper control over the internet. We are far from reaching that point. And even professional organizations are quite irresponsible in their claims. This was in 2008 when I was doing my best to help Simon Singh, who was being sued by the British Chiropractic Association for doubting some of their claims. And here they are, the British Chiropractic Associations. They sued my co-author and friend Simon Singh for doubting the claims that they put on their website. And one of the claims was that chiropractic is a treatment for asthma. This claim was also out there by the American Chiropractic Association, by the Canadians, Chiropractic Patient Association of the United States, and the International Chiropractic Association. To understand that, the claim is wrong. Chiropractic is not only an unproven treatment for asthma, it is a disproven treatment. There are not many studies, but by far the best and largest study clearly shows that it doesn't work. Yet these professional organizations, I should say so-called professional organizations, do promote bogus claims for which Simon was sued. Luckily he won his case. And even our regulators, the MHRA, are the drug regulators in the UK, are doing things which are rather strange. They 2 years ago gave a license to a homeopathic arnica product, and this is a quote, for the symptomatic relief of sprains, muscle aches, bruising and swelling after contusion. Ironically, arnica happens to be the one homeopathic remedy that actually has been tested in several clinical trials, and several independent systematic reviews, some of which are authored by homeopaths themselves, failed to show efficacy. Yet in the UK we have a license for a homeopathic arnica product. So one wonders, now how can we test scientifically whether alternative medicine works? You've noticed that I carefully used my phraseology here, because in alternative medicine far too often people use science not to test but to prove that these treatments work. And science is a very poor tool for proving anything. It's a tool for testing. So the terminology here is quite important. The answer to the question is in the same way we test any medicine. Sometimes I give lectures, as I said, to proponents of alternative medicine, and we discuss these issues of science and scientific testing of their treatments in some detail. And I often bring a bottle of wine and say, okay, if you show me one treatment that cannot be scientifically tested in a clinical trial, in a controlled clinical trial, I'll give you that bottle of wine. And then people come up with treatments like spiritual healing and even homeopathy, and we discuss the reasons why they think it cannot be tested, and then I sort of design a study for them, how I would test it, and then I take my bottle of wine and go home again. Double standards are extremely common, and lots of people in alternative medicine say we cannot apply science to our field for this and that reason, because it's holistic, because it's individualized, because it's not a single treatment but a complex package of interventions and so forth. These are problems that exist in conventional medicine just as well, and the solutions exist. So either the people who say otherwise are ill-informed, which is a polite way of saying they're incompetent, or they're lying, which is even less polite. But that's what I have come to conclude after 17 years of discussions around this subject. So how do we test it? Well, the principle is so easy that it's almost embarrassing. You have a group of patients who would typically suffer from the same condition, but even that is not necessarily the case. You treat them with one treatment, which I call here A, and another treatment B. You administer these treatments for a little while, and then you compare the results. And if the results differ, then you draw certain conclusions about that. Typically, A would be the experimental treatment, say homeopathy, and B could be a conventional approach to whatever these patients suffer from, or it could be a placebo or whatever. But that is how really dead simple the clinical trial is constructed. clinical trials are expensive. They are terribly expensive. They're tedious, etc., etc. And in alternative medicine, lots of people say they are so expensive that we cannot conduct them. I sympathize with that very much. We, at present, do not conduct a single clinical trial simply because we are running out of funding. And I do understand this being an issue. I, however, fail to accept that there's no money in alternative medicine. This is somebody you've seen before. David Beckham, when he moved to America, he got a lot of money. That's not the money I'm talking about. That's the money I'm talking about. Herbalife is an American producer of herbal supplements. And to get their emblem on his shirt, they must have paid more than 5 clinical trials in my department would have cost them. So I do not believe that there's no money. There's not as much money as in other fields of medical inquiry, but there is money. What do the tests show? Once we do these trials, what results do we produce? Over the years, I've been branded more and more a quackbuster. I should be proud to be depicted in the Times. This is from the Times. And probably a lot of politicians would be quite proud to have their picture drawn by an artist working for the Times. And I was quite flattered, because he does look like me, doesn't he? But I don't like the title quackbuster. I'm not a quackbuster. I'll show you why. This is the official aim, as it existed, of my unit. We want to conduct rigorous interdisciplinary and international collaborative research into the efficacy, safety and cost of complementary medicine. We want to further analytical thinking in this area, and we want to be neither promotional nor derogatory, but to struggle for objectivity. That is not the aim of a quackbuster. I'm a scientist, and my colleagues working for me are scientists. We are trying to apply science, the tools of science, the best we can to this rather weird and wonderful field. And if the results are negative, they often are, as a scientist, you publish the results. You could make them disappear. That would be dishonest. Even more dishonest would be to falsify the results and make them look positive. We don't believe in that. We believe in honesty, and therefore not a lot of positive findings do emerge. But some do. Some positive results do come out, even out of our work. And over the years, I've been so annoyed by the claim that I'm a quackbuster that I've produced a publication just selectively on our positive results. And this is the first of 2 slides showing you what treatments for what conditions in our hands produces positive results. Now, I'm aware that I'm speaking to skeptics, and you probably feel a little bit like this, having me tell you that. But I'll show you more, particularly about acupuncture, which is a big subject for alternative medicine as much as for skeptics. Just showing you the slide that acupuncture works for nausea and osteoarthritis is not very satisfactory. I'll show you a trial, which is not our trial. This is Brian Berman's trial, and he works in America. This was a randomized clinical trial with a sham control to control for placebo effects in acupuncture. The sample size was high, I would say very high. We struggle invariably to get such sample sizes. These people had knee osteoarthritis, obviously, and they were treated with regular acupuncture, with sham acupuncture, or they just received an educational booklet what to do when you suffer from knee osteoarthritis. The primary outcome measure of this trial was pain, and the results showed that pain improved more in group A, the one receiving regular acupuncture, compared to B. So a positive result. But that's not why on my previous slide. I need to tell you that that is just one study, and one swallow doesn't make a summer, and there are lots of cherry pickers around. This is what this slide is about. You mustn't cherry pick, and I've only shown you one slide, and you should criticize me for that. But here's the systematic review. If you have more than one trial, and very often, almost invariably, you do have more than one trial, you have the obligation to look at the totality of this evidence. You can't just cherry pick. If you're against that therapy, you take the negative trials. If you're in favor, you take the positive trials. And you never come together. So a systematic review, in a way, synthesizes all the trials on a certain subject of a certain quality and creates a new overall conclusion. And this is our own systematic review of acupuncture for osteoarthritis. We looked at all randomized clinical trials of needle acupuncture. We included any language, including the Chinese language, which is a bit problematic in some ways. We found 18 randomized clinical trials. That's several years ago. Now we have a few more. And the results indicated that in terms of pain reduction, there was a significant effect, and the effect was better than sham acupuncture, indicating that acupuncture for this indication is actually more than a placebo. And our conclusion, acupuncture seems an option worthy of consideration. You can see that scientists are not very courageous. They don't like to stick their head out. And we were extremely cautious for a number of reasons, because there's a big problem with sham, etc., etc. But we mustn't be overcritical. We must apply roughly the same standards as we would apply to, say, a pharmaceutical. And if there had been a pharmaceutical backed by 18 randomized clinical trials showing a pain reduction, we would have also come to that conclusion. So in other words, in our book, it is positive. This is the second part of the positive results slide. And you can see that a number of other treatments are effective when we look at them. And the best example probably is St. John's wort. That probably is the Rolls Royce in alternative medicine. Arguably, there's better evidence for St. John's wort to alleviate depression than for conventional antidepressants. And again, I'm going to show you some actual results here. This was a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is where you statistically combine trials, and the authors, not us, but other authors, found 30 randomized clinical trials a few years ago. Now we have, I would say, just under 40. And of course, with that sort of number, you wouldn't expect all of them to agree entirely. So there's a level of disagreement within these data. But collectively, if you look at the totality of the data, you find that St. John's wort is better than placebo, and quite substantially better, indicated by the relative risk, and the number needed to treat is 41, which is a bit high, but in the same region as for conventional treatments. Number needed to treat means you need to treat 42 patients for one patient to show significant benefit from that treatment. And plenty of trials also with a total sample size of over 2,000 comparing St. John's wort with synthetic conventional antidepressants. And we can see that there's virtual equivalence. 1.0 would be total equivalence, indicating that St. John's wort is at least as effective as the synthetic antidepressant. So anybody who tells you I'm a quackbuster and I only produce negative results is again not well informed or not telling the truth. What about cost effectiveness? That is a big issue, of course. On the political level, people try to convince politicians that these treatments would save money if we only used them more frequently. And therefore there's a big discussion whether that is actually so. Would we save money if we all were treated by homeopaths with homeopathic remedies? Well, here, in a way, this is a systematic review of systematic reviews. We've found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 systematic reviews on this subject of cost evaluation. Most of them are our own, I have to say. All our own except this one. This might be an interesting one. It included 34 studies and came to this rather typical conclusion that if you look retrospectively, there are some studies that suggest you might do savings, but retrospective studies are very much open to bias. Much better to have prospective data, and the prospective data actually show the opposite, namely that it would inflict extra costs on our healthcare system if we used more alternative medicines. So, this was evidence, positive evidence, and I can see you're rather shocked by that. What about some negative evidence to cheer you up? If you're puzzled that acupuncture appears both with the negative and the positive evidence, you have to look at the indication. Acupuncture, according to the best evidence we have today, works for osteoarthritis of the knee in terms of pain reduction, but it does not work for drug or nicotine dependence, nor for smoking dependence. Or nicotine dependence is smoking dependence. What about the anti-aging scams? We have a paper about to be published on that. What about batch flower remedies? These are similar but not identical with homeopathic remedies. What about the alternative mania with detox, eliminating toxins that allegedly poison our bodies if we don't take this or that treatment or apply this or that gadget? What about homeopathy? We'll discuss that in a little detail in a moment. What about magnets, spiritual healing, and the many weight loss scams that you will find on the internet? We have published extensively, and we have a research fellow in my unit who does nothing else but looking at these weight loss scams. What about them? That's Samuel Hahnemann, who was mentioned in the introduction, who invented homeopathy about 200 years ago. A German doctor, and he established a dogma that underpins homeopathy, and it includes diluting the remedies stepwise and shaking them. Homeopaths speak of potentiation, and in this slide, the dilutions are one volume of substance, 9 volumes of dilutant, and this is called the depicted by the letter D in homeopathic language. So you can see if you dilute it in that way once, you have very little 1/10 left. If you dilute it twice, you have virtually nothing left, and less and less left until very soon on this curve. The likelihood that you have a single active molecule in your homeopathic remedies approaches 0. And that's why scientists find homeopathy totally unbelievable. Homeopaths counter that, yeah, of course, we know that this is being diluted and there's no molecule. We don't claim that this is a pharmacological action. We claim it's some form of energy that is operative in homeopathic medicines. So that is a claim which needs testing, and the best way to test that is in clinical trials. Here we have the dilution again. Is it a drop in the bucket, a drop in the bath, a drop in the ocean? No, it actually is, for most homeopathic remedies, it's a drop in the universe, and we cannot comprehend how this can possibly function. You would think that where there's no molecule, there is no effect. Yet homeopaths do show you studies, and this is just one example, where they claim this is an effect. This was a study, again, arnica, in the 30C dilution, 30 times diluted 1 volume of arnica to 99 volumes of dilutant. And this was a study post-operative pain. This is what arnica is often recommended for, versus placebo. The patients received for 2 weeks post-operatively either the placebo or the arnica. And the result was arnica provides a significant decrease in pain. And that, I think, is surprising. You don't need to be a statistician to see that there's no difference here. The two curves are so parallel. But by coincidence, I would say, on 3 time points, here, here, and here, there is a significant difference. But it's meaningless. It's totally meaningless. You could just as well argue that early on in this curve, the placebo is better than the arnica. I think the curve shows that they're equal. So you can massage the data and squeeze the data. The curve obviously wasn't published with that study. It's the curve that I've drawn from the data. And when you only present it with these 3 data points, you might be quite impressed, but you need to see the whole picture, and you need to critically analyze what is being presented here. Homeopathy is incredibly popular across the world. That has a number of historical reasons. The most popular, it seems to be in India. Ask the question, do you trust homeopathic medicine? In India, 62% in this study seem to agree, which is truly amazing. Again, we don't seem to have Sweden here, but we have Great Britain, and the Brits are much more skeptical. But even so, 15% do agree that they trust homeopathic remedies. And surprisingly, these are the insurance companies that pay for homeopathic remedies in Great Britain. So I'd say most of them actually, that's private insurance, and you can have obviously on the national health service you can have homeopathic remedies, and we used to have 5 homeopathic hospitals in Great Britain. Now we have just 4 left, and one was just renamed into Hospital of Integrated Medicine. Here comes again this magic new word. Now, there are different attitudes here when it comes to evaluating or judging unproven treatments. In mainstream medicine, I think most people would say a treatment should not be used until it has been proven to be effective. That is a very simple rule. We not always abide by it, but that's what we should abide by it. In alternative medicine, it seems to be a treatment can be used as long as it has not been proven to be ineffective. Now, that is entirely different. Knowing how difficult it is to prove a negative with the tools of science, that's quite a task to prove everything ineffective, and unless we do that, it can be used in alternative medicine. So this difference of attitude, in my view and experience, explains quite a lot of the debates and controversies we are having between mainstream medicine and alternative medicine. And we must not forget the flip side of this coin. People seem to think that because these treatments are natural, they are also safe. Arguably, nothing is natural at all with sticking an acupuncture needle into a patient. But let's assume it is natural. We cannot assume it is safe. Safety is quite simply far too important to be based on opinion. We need data. So very early on, we decided that the safety of these treatments actually was, for us, a research priority. When we announced that, we received a lot of criticism. People said, are you not aware that safety issues are not important in alternative medicine? Safety issues are important in mainstream medicine. That's where thousands of patients die on side effects every year, etc., etc. Well, we didn't agree with it, and we did early on here in blue a study which was quite simple, a large sample size, but we asked patients using these treatments whether they had perceived adverse effects after these treatments. It was a simple study, but it was so important that we managed to publish it in Nature, which was very good. And those who had experienced spinal manipulation, 16% said they had side effects. With acupuncture, it was 13%. With homeopathy, 10%. Herbal medicine, roughly 8%. Now here in red is what we know presently about that, because these blue figures are quite dated now, and they're based on survey data rather than actual hard science. We know today from quite a few prospective surveys that about 50% of people seeing a chiropractor suffer from side effects. 50%, every second person. Chiropractors say that doesn't count, because these are quite minor side effects, and things have to get worse before they get better. Well, you can believe that or not, and it does count, because these side effects can be strong enough to impede the quality of life of patients. With acupuncture, we now have a huge amount of prospective data to show that actually this figure was pretty spot on. Depending on which data set you want to believe, it's between 7 and 11% of patients after acupuncture suffering side effects. When I say suffering, in this case, it's perhaps not the best term, because these are truly mild side effects. The acupuncture needle causing pain or bleeding when we stick it into the skin, for instance. With homeopathy, this 20% figure is actually refers to what homeopaths call a homeopathic aggravation, which means that the presenting symptom of that patient gets dramatically worse. And according to homeopaths, that is the case in 20% of all cases. We have shown that this is pure fantasy, but it is, according to the thinking of homeopaths, correct. And with herbal medicine, you can't really tell, because there are so many different herbal medicines. Some are totally free of side effects, and some are very, very associated with very severe side effects indeed. So one can't give an average figure. Just to come back briefly to the side effects of spinal manipulation chiropractic, I've mentioned the incidence of 50% side effects, which are mild or moderate. In addition, and that is, I think, much more important, we have very serious events after particularly upper spinal manipulation. What happens that certain movements seem to disrupt an artery supplying the brain in such a way that it bursts, and you can have a stroke, and you can die of a stroke. And the incidence figures vary tremendously, but because of underreporting and other uncertainties, nobody really knows what the incidence is. And then we have to consider the danger of the therapist themselves. I don't necessarily mean that guy. The standard chiropractor in the UK was interviewed by chiropractors. This is not our work, and we can see here that only 23% always discuss serious risks with their patients. That, in my view, is pretty shocking. It means that there's a lack of informed consent, because informed consent would require just that. And it means that patients are not aware that these risks exist. They go to chiropractors and expose themselves to risks of which they are not properly informed. Now, this was very interesting and led to a lot of controversy. In Britain, we have an organization called Dr. Foster, and Dr. Foster monitor all sorts of things in healthcare. You can, for instance, look up what your local hospital's death rate is. You can even look up what your surgeon's death rate is. So Dr. Foster does that sort of research. And one day they approached us and said, we want to do something on complementary alternative practitioners. And we said, great, and we cooperated, and we designed 5 criteria which we called best practice criteria. Very simple things like keeping record and really entirely basic things. Informed consent, keeping record and things. And here you have the acupuncturists, chiropractors, osteopaths, homeopaths, and herbalists who fulfill all these very, very basic criteria. And the acupuncturists are by far the best. That is because many of them are actually doctors. The other alternative professions are dismally bad. Perhaps you say fulfilling all 5 is a tall order, even though they're basic criteria. Maybe we should lower the bar and look at who fulfills at least 3 of these basic criteria. Again, the chiropractors, the acupuncturists are the best, but the chiropractors, osteopaths, homeopaths and herbalists aren't good at all. And that often leads me to think that perhaps homeopathy, for instance, talking about homeopathy, the homeopathic remedy is free of side effects and therefore free of risk. But I doubt that the homeopath is free of risk if they don't fulfill even the basic criteria. So, we've heard about homeopathy, batch flower remedies, and other very popular treatment, which, in my book, are proven ineffective. I've told you how difficult it is to prove ineffectiveness with science, but as close as you can get, I think we can say they do not work. So why do people still use them? And that's an interesting question which goes far beyond alternative medicine, in my view, and requires a little bit of explanation. This is graphically what happens when a patient or a group of patients see a clinician and receive treatment. They come because they have symptoms. Let's say they're suffering from pain. They come because initially the pain is pretty severe, and therefore schematically this point is high on the scale. Then they receive a treatment, and in the best case scenario, the pain decreases, and after a while it is substantially less or even gone. And the difference between the initial level of pain and the end level of pain is what we call the magnitude of the benefit or the perceived therapeutic effect and so forth. So what we have done wrong, I think, in all types of medicine is to assume that this improvement is due to the treatment. We quite simply assume that because this treatment was administered, there is a causal relationship between the decrease of pain and the treatment. That assumption is being made since the time the first clinician started treating a patient. It is being made not just in alternative medicine, but it's made in any type of medicine. It is common, it is something that we as doctors probably have to assume, because otherwise we couldn't carry on working. And it's as common as it is wrong. Here just one quote. I have been in practice for over 30 years, and I find it, he's talking about individualized herbalism. It works very well. You can't have a successful practice unless your patients get better. That can't be just the placebo effect. People are not stupid. That is the expression of what I said in the words of the chair of the Association of Master Herbalists. But even Oscar Wilde, who wasn't a doctor, said, experience is the name we give to our mistakes, and that is at the heart of this matter. If patients get better, it can be due to many, many factors. And in this slide, I just show you some of them. Again, schematically, they're not all necessarily have the same size. Of course, it could be due to the treatment, and then it would be what we call a specific effect of the treatment. But it could also be the placebo effect, and this is where usually we stop, and that herbalist stopped here. He said it's so reproducible it cannot just be placebo. But he also interacts with his patients, and that person-to-person interaction we know has important effects. More importantly, perhaps, the natural history of the disease, of most diseases, thankfully, is such that people get better whether they are treated or not treated. If I have a common cold and get the best treatment for the common cold, I may suffer a week. If I get no treatment at all, I'll be ill for 7 days. That is called the natural history of the disease. Then there's regression towards the mean, which is a statistical quirk. I won't go into that. Social desirability, which means patients say I'm better because we are nice as doctors to patients, and they want to be nice back, but in fact the patient might not be better. Concomitant treatments, particularly if we are talking of chronic diseases, patients tend to take all sorts of things at the same time, and if one of these things is actually effective, then this might make the treatment that we are discussing appear effective in false positive result, and other context effects which I haven't listed here. So the equation is hugely complicated. You cannot solve a single equation with half a dozen unknowns, and therefore to establish cause effect on such a uncontrolled experiment is simply not possible. So let's assume it's a placebo effect. That is what springs into people's mind very often. And then people say, what is wrong? If I make my patient better with a homeopathic remedy, I'm not doing any harm. As a clinician, my first duty is to help the patient. So if the homeopathic remedy helps the patient, that is fine. What is wrong with that? The answer is a lot. First of all, it's unethical. If I give a patient a homeopathic remedy and say, try this, it might help you, I'm basically telling that patient a lie. The truth is, and I have to tell the truth to patients according to medical ethics, to modern medical ethics, the truth is this doesn't contain anything, the results don't show anything, and bugger off, don't get on my nerves with your complaint. That is truly unethical. The placebo effect is also very unreliable. People sometimes respond, sometimes they don't respond, and it's unpredictable who responds and who doesn't respond. It's not always safe. Some placebos are not at all safe. Think of the side effects of chiropractic that I've shown to you. And one doesn't need a placebo to generate a placebo effect. That sounds paradoxical, but it isn't. If I see a patient with a headache, I might give that patient a homeopathic remedy and hope he benefits from the placebo effect. If I give the same patient a treatment for his condition, an effective treatment for his condition, and I do that with empathy, kindness, understanding, and time, I also generate a placebo effect. So that patient will benefit from the placebo effect plus the specific therapeutic effect. If you turn this around, if I only give a placebo, I'm cheating that patient. So, coming back to this man, who has been a lot on my mind for a number of reasons. That's what Prince Charles' vision of health is. Ancient healing practices, clean air, pure water, plenty of exercise, organic farming, etc. Does that make sense? And that is my very last slide. Sometimes, no, something is not right. Our air is clean, our water is pure, we all get plenty of exercise, everything we eat is organic and free range. We use ancient healing techniques, and yet nobody lives past 30. So going back in the way that some proponents of alternative medicine propose is perhaps not the best idea. The way forward is science and perhaps some of the alternative treatments can be proven with science. Those that cannot be proven to work or to generate more good than harm with science shouldn't be used. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Edzard, for this fascinating overview and very refreshing perspective on the matter of things. We have time for a few questions. Take this opportunity to ask a world authority. I think we have a microphone somewhere.
There's a question here.
Do we have a microphone? Yes. Here's a running microphone.
Thank you. I had a few questions about acupuncture. Some advocates of acupuncture say it works through the release of endorphins. Does acupuncture have any value in treating pain syndromes over regular therapies?
Yeah, that is absolutely true. There's some what we might call basic research that explains how acupuncture might actually do what it does in terms of health outcomes. So some studies show that it releases endorphins, which are substances that are often called the body's own painkiller. If that were true, it could explain the pain-killing effect that we see clinically. So the crunch question, the acid test, so to speak, of any type of treatment is clearly not the mechanism, even though it is very helpful to understand the mechanism. The crunch question is, does it work clinically? And I tried to show you that for some indications, like osteoarthritis of the knee, there's very good evidence that it actually does, or let's say reasonably good evidence that it actually does. So that would tie in with what you just said, that we understand the mechanism, and there are several. You mentioned the endorphins, there are others as well. And all of this together makes acupuncture much more plausible as a treatment than, for instance, homeopathy, where we cannot even begin to understand how this all fits together. If there's no molecule, we think there can not be any effect. So if we have a mechanism, then things become much more logical in a way, and I think for acupuncture that is actually the case, even though the data is not as straightforward as I've implied it to be. There are also studies that fail to show that it does raise endorphins, etc. But at least we have a glimpse of a mechanism which makes it plausible.
Okay. A follow-up question. I have spoken to 2 patients that used acupuncture against nausea, and they claim that they can feel if the needle is hitting the correct spot. And my question there is, how do you feel that the question whether real acupuncture versus sham acupuncture can experienced patients know if they get the sham acupuncture?
Yeah, just repeating, the question was, is the sham acupuncture that we and others developed in order to control for placebo effects, is that actually credible? Does the patient not feel the difference? Well, what you do when you develop a sham device, what we did when we validate it, and part of this validation process is to find out whether patients do tell, whether patients are able to tell the difference. And in our hands, they were not. So we are confident that it is a credible placebo control for acupuncture trials. But there's an argument about that. Not everybody agrees, and some you cited 2 patients who seem to feel the difference. Our validation obviously had to be on patients who have never had acupuncture before. Once you have had the experience of true acupuncture, the likelihood that you can tell is probably higher, and it's not a fair. It wouldn't be a fair validation process. But I grant you, there's a discussion on that.
Okay. My final question was regarding electrical acupuncture. Do those treatments have enough volts and amps to create a therapeutic effect over regular acupuncture?
Yeah. The question is, what about electroacupuncture? Acupuncture typically uses needle to stimulate acupuncture points. Now, this stimulation can be done by a lot of other means as well. One is applying a little electrical current to the point. And there are studies that suggest that this is a credible means of stimulating the acupuncture point. Whether it is better than the actual physical needle acupuncture, I don't know of any sound evidence that it's better. But it is used a lot, and acupuncturists believe that it is a credible means of using acupuncture. You can even use it without a needle, just apply a little pad there, then it gets very similar to electrotherapy, which we use in other fields of medicine, and the TENS machine. Some of you probably know the TENS machine. Then if you do it without needle, then it gets quite similar to that, except that the TENS machine is not typically applied over acupuncture points. But you're quite right. That's what a lot of acupuncturists do, and they do. So
it's just basically regular acupuncture then.
Yeah, I don't see a fundamental difference. In the important point is, or seems to be, in the thinking of acupuncturists to stimulate that point. You can do it with heat, with laser light, with electrical currents, or I think best in the traditional way, because that is what we're trying to test, whether acupuncture works rather than any of its derivatives. If you disprove electroacupuncture, you haven't disproven needle acupuncture, so you might as well test the needle acupuncture. That's my view about the research on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's another question in the middle there.
On your first list, you have had one point, laughter therapy. It wasn't among the ones you elaborated on, but could you perhaps mention something about that? Because there are many people who believe that it is very effective.
I wish I could, but I can't. I haven't done any trials of laughter therapy. I don't know many trials of laughter therapy, and it appears to me that it's one of those many treatments where you would be struggling to find a good control. If your research question is, does it have specific effects, then your next question needs to be, what is a placebo for laughter therapy? So placebo laughter is unknown to me, but I know too little to give you a competent answer.
Any further questions? Yes, one in the front. While the microphone gets there, maybe I can ask a quick question, a more peripheral one perhaps, but it has implications for the role of alternative therapies in society. You showed interesting statistics for the articles about alternative medicine with very high numbers. Why do you think journalists are so interested in writing about this? Does this reflect a real interest, or is it a reflection of an interest among journalists?
No, I don't think. If you remember the slide, this was over many years, 6 years. I don't think journalists would get away with it riding a hobby horse, pursuing their own personal interest. The editor would quickly notice that this is not what interests the public, and they would get fired or sent to another subject. I don't think it can be that. I think the public is very keen on hearing stories about alternative medicine, and this is the UK public. We also did a comparative study where in the same time span, 3 different time spans across 1 year, we compared Germany with Britain, and we found remarkable differences, national differences. In Britain, the interest in alternative medicine seemed to be 3 times higher than in Germany. We also looked at reporting of medicine in general, and we found that the spin, so to speak, in Germany was quite balanced. There were critical articles and there were articles on mainstream medicine and articles on alternative medicine, whereas in the UK, almost 100% of the articles on alternative medicine had a positive spin. They were praising alternative medicine. They were saying how wonderful it is because royalty is using it, or some other very important person, etc. And there were very few negative articles. There were also very few articles, or much fewer articles, on mainstream medicine. So the interest in medicine in my country seems to focus on alternative medicine. If you're a journalist and you want to sell your story, you better bring in some alternative medicine, otherwise the editor won't have it because the public doesn't read it.
But still, the statistics you showed in a different slide showed that Germany uses 4 times as much alternative medicine as the UK.
Yeah, that is
it's a paradox.
An apparent paradox. Some people have a lot of sex, and some people speak a lot about sex. So it's only an apparent paradox, I think. Obviously, the Brits speak a lot about, talk a lot about alternative medicine, and have very little.
I know that some people in the field where I work, that's appetite regulation, speak about food pornography when we watch all these TV chefs all the time. So we're almost speaking about alternative medicine pornography here when we read about that a lot. The next question from the audience, please.
Yeah, I heard you spoke about chiropractics. What's your opinion like about risk versus benefits from that?
It depends on which condition you're treating.
Neck problems.
Yeah, for neck problems, obviously the chiropractor would treat the neck, and this is what I would consider the danger area because of the anatomical situation with the arteries and the many cases of burst arteries having been reported about after chiropractic treatment. So the evidence for chiropractic to treat successfully neck problems is not very strong. It's I know this is perhaps surprising because chiropractors claim the opposite, but there's a Cochrane review and other reviews, and the evidence is not very strong. So you have, at best, I would say, a question mark on the benefit side, and you have quite a heavy weight on the risk side. Now, if you put these two on the scale, I think the scale would go towards the risk. The risk outweighs the benefit, and I would not even send my enemy to a chiropractor for that indication. And by Jove, I have many of those.
There was actually an article in the Swedish Physicians Journal a few years ago investigating people who have died some time after chiropractic treatment of the neck region. And sadly enough, it was younger people that seemed to be at higher risk to die from the injuries, and that's because apparently the chiropractors turn the head more in younger people than in elderly people. So there's a higher risk for rupture of the blood vessels supporting the brain.
But I heard that just the techniques that just expose the vertebral artery for the most stress are not used anymore. Is that true?
Okay. I don't know. Do you know?
I didn't understand.
The techniques that are used that stress the vertebral arteries the most are not used anymore. Is that true?
No. What is true that there are a vast number of techniques which we all summarize under the umbrella spinal manipulation, and in this case upper spinal manipulation. And different professions use different techniques. Physiotherapists use the dangerous techniques far less. Osteopaths use them far less than chiropractors. But to the best of my knowledge, chiropractors use techniques which the crucial point is here to go outside the range of physiological motion. And these techniques continue to be used by chiropractors quite a lot.
I've read several studies about vertebral artery dissection, and there are studies that suggest that it's probably more risky to go to a general practitioner than to a chiropractor. That it's they suggest that the pain that the patients seek for is because of the dissection has already started.
Yeah.
Have you heard?
Yeah, that's a North American study, one study, which suggests that what we are discussing here is just the background noise, because strokes of that nature happen spontaneously. So they compared people going with their neck pain to go to a doctor, GP, or to a chiropractor, and they found that the incidence, the frequency of these dissected arteries, that's the technical term for what we're talking about, is the same. So they concluded that this whole story is a windbag of no importance. That is one study. Vis-a-vis that one negative study, we have a whole mountain of positive studies. So again, I have to plead to not cherry pick and use the study that you happen to like, but use the totality of the evidence. And when I do that, the totality of the evidence clearly implies what I just said.
Any further questions? This is the last chance. We're approaching the end of this session. Okay, no further burning questions. So we thank Edzard again. Thank you very much.